Do you have all the things they say should make you happy, but you still feel unfulfilled? Are you always doing what you should do? Or do you never feel like you're enough? And you want to feel better, more fulfilled, more aligned, and more comfortable in your own body? Then this is the show. Scared as fuck and doing it anyway, showing up authentically. My name is Paula Schuster, and I'm a self-love and authenticity coach. My life completely changed when I started loving myself again, putting myself first, and being true to me. This is the show that's going to help you get out of being stuck, out of the cycles of self-abandonment, and help you choose yourself without feeling selfish. It will give you not only inspiration, but awareness, courage, and insights to make changes and live your life for you.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Scared as Fuck and Doing It Anyway, Showing Up Authentically podcast. I'm your host, Paula Schuster, and I am so excited about having Kute Blackson on the podcast today. Kute has been changing lives for the last 20 plus years as a transformational teacher, guide, and coach. He's also a best-selling author and is considered a next generation leader in the personal development field. So it's just such a treat to have him on. His newest book, which he's here to talk about today, is called The Magic of Surrender, and it focuses on finding the courage to let go. So put your courage capes on. Letting go can be really scary because that means we're giving up the control that we think we have, but it can also be the most freeing thing that we do, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We're also going to talk about how we can begin to surrender. Like, what are the first steps that we can take, and what can we begin to shift within us in that process? And I think that applies to most, if not all of us. Surrender is such a powerful tool for manifestation and freedom, and Kute will talk about that as well. And he'll share many insights to help us rise to who we really want to be and who we're really meant to be. He's such a talented coach, and his mission is simple. He wants to awaken and inspire people across the planet to access inner freedom, live authentically, and fulfill their true life's purpose. So if you're struggling to find your path, your purpose, or your meaning in life, or if you want to find the path to surrender and letting go so you can allow the magic of life to lead you, listen up. I'm so in awe of Kute and his work, and I just love his story. He's an amazing person, and there's no doubt he'll have countless gems and words of wisdom to share with us today. And I just know that what he has to say will resonate deeply with all of us. He's such a remarkable speaker, which you'll all get a taste of. And I'm just so grateful and blessed that he's here with us. So without further ado, let's welcome Kute Blackson. Welcome, Kute.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate you.
Yes, absolutely. For those of my listeners, Kute, who may not be familiar with who you are, do you want to give just a brief version of your story?
Wow. It's gonna be hard to give brief. I could probably give a few podcast episodes about my life and my story, written books about it. Look, I was born in Ghana, West Africa. My father's from Ghana. My mother's Japanese. I grew up in London. I live in the US. So I've always felt like a citizen of the world. For the last 20 plus years, I've been privileged to transform people's lives. Written 2 best-selling books as a transformational teacher, guide, coach. It's been a hell of a journey in this human experience. And so from a very young age, I've always felt a sense of calling, a calling to impact, a calling to inspire people in some way. I felt that calling since I was age 5, age 6. I didn't know what form that would take. And some would say that my childhood was a bit unusual in a certain way. Although for me, I thought my childhood was like everyone's. I didn't know any difference. It seemed quite normal. Like my first memories as a young boy, in terms of where my journey started, my first memories as a young boy, 5, 6, 7 years old, I remember being lost in the crowd in Ghana, West Africa, seeing a crippled woman crawling on the floor. She picks up the sand, the gravel that this man walks on, wipes it on her face and stands up. I guess you could call it a miracle. And so week after week, I grew up seeing that what some would consider the miraculous. But for me, it just seemed like another day. It just seemed ordinary. I just didn't think anything of it because I was used to seeing these miracles. And so the same man whose sand she picked up would look at someone in a wheelchair and say, "Hey, why are you in this wheelchair? You're not sick, stand up." The same man would look at a person who would come in with crutches and say, hey, why you have these crutches? Throw your crutches away. And so this man was my father. He was considered the miracle man of Africa, a very spiritual man, mystical man, metaphysical man, really interesting character. Some would call him an enlightened being in a certain way. But for me, he was just my father. And so he built 300 churches in Ghana, West Africa, a huge hundreds of thousands of followers, a huge church in London, 5,000 people every Sunday at his height. And so my speaking career began when I was age 8. And I started to speak in my father's church at the age of 8, thrown in the audience one day. Words started coming out of my mouth, and that began my speaking career. And when I was 14, I was actually ordained as a minister in my father's church. I was designated the successor to my father and his organization, and everybody was happy but me, because in a strange sense, as much as I wanted to help people, there was a deep knowing inside of me that this was not my path. There was a deep knowing inside of me that this was not my trajectory, my destiny. But I think as a young boy, like many of us, I was too afraid to speak my truth. My fear was if I spoke my truth, then I would be outcast. If I spoke my truth, then I would lose my father's love. If I spoke my truth, then I would lose love. I would be alone. And so I said nothing. And I got ordained, went along with it for 4 years, went through a deep internal conflict and turmoil because I tried to fit myself into a box of what I thought my father and society and people wanted me to be. Talk about scared. I was terrified, of losing love and losing my father. And so after about 4 years of just trying to be who I thought the world wanted me to be, I was so miserable, and said a prayer one day. And I felt at the age of 17 and a half, 18, I felt such an undeniable calling that told me to come to America, told me to go to the US, specifically California, specifically Los Angeles, in a strange way, because, as a young boy, I was sneaking to my father's office. He had a bookshelf with thousands of books, and he had self-help spiritual books. And I'd read everyone from Osho and Krishnamurti and Gurdjieff and Theosophical Society to the Western mystics, Wayne Dyer, Louise Hay, Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson. The thing is, all the Western folks lived in the US, they lived in California, they lived in Southern California, San Diego, LA. And so I thought, this is where, at least my soul said, this is where you must go. And I think it's interesting because I think sometimes what your soul guides you to do doesn't make sense to your mind. Sometimes what your soul guides you to do doesn't make sense to your logic. Sometimes often what your soul guides you to do is not comfortable, is not convenient, is downright terrifying, and it's scary as fuck, so to speak. And many times we allow fear to hijack our freedom and our voice and our full expression because of this fear. And I think when we live inside of fear, we end up living inside of a very limited prison that we make for ourselves. And so I felt like I didn't have a choice. And I knew for me what that would mean. That was like a real moment of courage as a young man, maybe a first conscious moment of courage, where I knew that I had to leave my father's church. I decided to renounce everything, let go of everything, leave the ministry, much to everyone's disappointment, and I had to have a conversation with my father. So a real scary moment for me was at 18, confronting my father, a man I respected. We weren't super close, but I looked up to him, and having to tell this man that I loved and wanted his validation, look, I'm not taking over. And long story short, we didn't speak for 2 years, which was heartbreaking. And a longer story short, I really believe that when you follow your soul and when you follow your true soul's guidance, you will always end up in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing with the right people, because your soul has an intelligence of its own. And so when I had that conversation, I was not only, sometimes people think that when you follow your guidance and you follow your purpose, it's like everything gets easy. The unicorns appear, the violins appear, life just unfolds. Sometimes when you follow your soul, shit hits the fan, and that's when the real challenges and difficulties emerge. And many times people think that they are on the wrong track because, well, I'm following my soul and life is falling apart. But I think that when you follow your soul, life has to fall apart the way you know it. The old you, the old life, the old structures have to fall apart to make room for the new possibility, the new expression, the new version of yourself. And so many times we think we're on the wrong path when we face these difficulties, but these difficulties are really, shall we say, soul tests for you to grow through and go through in order to evolve so that you can become the person that is capable of fulfilling the dream and the vision. And so I was in a moment where I was scared, in the unknown, didn't know what to do. And I said a prayer. I said, God, you're giving me this vision. You're giving me this dream. If this is real, I need help. And I kid you not, within days, somebody handed me a magazine called The Economist. And I look in the back, and I always say, life gives you clues. So I was following the clues. I felt a chill. It says the American government's giving away 55,000 green cards in the green card lottery. Long story short, I ended up entering. Longer story short, I ended up winning a green card, literally a green card in the green card lottery that then enabled me to come to the US, 2 suitcases, $800 in my pocket, and just following a dream. And that's what brought me to Los Angeles as a young man. I went and found many of the teachers, the mentors, the authors that I studied about, read about, were my heroes, studied with some of them. And a few years later, I decided to go on my own journey. Again, scared, terrified, but following the calling of my soul. And I decided to travel. I decided to go walk the Camino in northern Spain. I decided to go to study with some monks in Thailand and to rabbis in Israel. My journey took me to India, and it was in India that something happened for me, and things kind of cracked open to another dimension of life and possibility. And that's when I was guided again to come back to America to 20 some years ago, begin coaching people. And that's when my journey began. One person showed up, another person showed up. I had no idea what I was doing. Another person showed up, and slowly I was guided to create and evolve my own methodology and way of working with people that was incredibly transformative, and lives changed. People's lives changed, and people started coming from around the world, and it just started snowballing to small groups, to large groups, to larger groups, and it just kept evolving. And so 20 years later, 2 best-selling books, here I am.
So thank you for sharing all of that. I have so many questions, but one of them, you talked about, if you're following your soul's purpose, you're going to be in the right place at the right time. And so, and then, your father was obviously not necessarily happy with your decision to leave the church. But yet you were following your path. And I love that you were doing that at such an early age. It took me so many more years to do it. I didn't have the courage and the wherewithal to do it when I was younger. And so now I'm finally doing it when I'm a little old, but there had to have been an element of surrender, right, in all of that, because you were surrendering to your soul's purpose. Was there an awareness of that when it was happening? I mean, talk about that a little bit.
An awareness of surrender?
Of surrendering to it.
No, I don't know if there was a awareness of surrender. I just felt a calling in my soul. I felt something bigger than myself, beyond Kute, beyond my mind, beyond my logic. I just felt this thing pulling me and nudging me and pushing me and prodding me and pulling me. And I couldn't explain it. I couldn't quantify it. All I knew was something felt right and something made sense. And just, I felt like I didn't have a choice. And so I didn't think about it in terms of surrender in that moment. I just thought about it in the sense of, I'm being called, I'm being pulled, and I'm being propelled in a direction. And I guess looking back, I chose to surrender to it, but it wasn't a conscious thought in that moment, like, oh, I'm going to surrender. It was just, I don't have a choice. My destiny is taking me in a certain direction. I think we all have moments where we feel something calling us, something pulling us, something moving us. But the challenge as human beings is because we're afraid. We're afraid of the unknown. We're afraid of getting hurt. We're afraid of other people's opinions. We're afraid of disappointment. We're afraid of being disappointed. We're afraid of disappointing. We're afraid of, so many things. We're afraid of how we're going to be perceived. So that often we don't follow the nudging, the calling that we feel. And so I think when we deny or we resist the calling of our soul, when we don't surrender and we resist the calling of our being, our essence, that's when we get sick. That's when we experience depression and frustration and anxiety, because we're not in the flow of the energy of what's natural. We're creating a blockage, a dam, a stoppage in the natural flow of life that is seeking to express to us, And so, and then also what I have found is many times when we receive a guidance, like, okay, go here, go to America, do this, enter that, call that person, often that deeper soul guidance is emerging from a deeper dimension than your mind. That intuitive information, inspiration is not arising from logic. It's not arising from the past. It's arising from a deeper dimension of your being that is unconditioned. And it often doesn't make sense to your logic or your mind because it's not limited to logic, mind, or ego. And so because it doesn't make sense, what then tends to happen, which is one of the ways we block the soul expression, is we try to make sense of everything. Well, what does this mean? And how? Basically, this is the ego strategy to try to control, to remain in control. Because if I can control everything by analyzing and understanding what everything means, then maybe I won't get hurt. And so really, we're afraid. It's fear that's running us, right? And so I think what I found I did then, that I didn't know I was doing then, that I actually encourage people to do now, is to remember that you don't have to know where you're going to get to exactly where you need to be. Yeah. But if you feel the nudging, the guidance, that soul something, just take a step, take a step, take a step, follow it. Don't, basically, what I had to learn to do was not question. And so it took me a moment, but as a young man, I just stopped questioning. Well, turn left. Why? I stopped asking why. Go here. I just take a step left, turn left. I have found that life reveals itself in the process of living itself. You don't have to know where you're going to get to exactly where you need to be. There's an intelligence inside of you that knows. And so for me, it's just been a process of learning how to trust that intelligence. And sometimes part of the guidance has come by whenever I didn't trust that intelligence, I got slapped in the face by the universe. I was like, oops, that hurt. So let me not question, let me trust the intelligence.
Yeah. I love that. Just taking a step. You don't have to know where you're going because the unknown is where the magic is.
Exactly.
And I'm experiencing so much of that in my life now because I'm doing that same thing. I'm taking the step and the universe is meeting me, right? Whereas before I planned out everything, like I had to and tried to control everything for, lots of different reasons, but that's how I lived my life. And there was no magic for the unknown, for the universe to show me how blissful things can be. And so now I'm doing that. So I can attest to that as well, that's where the magic is. It's in the unknown. So just take the first step and you'll be on your way. Listen to the breadcrumbs and the whispers and the nudgings that you're talking about to get. I love all that. So tell us, what made you write the book, Magic of Surrender?
And what made me write the book? That is an interesting question. I wish I could say it was divine inspiration, but the truth is, this was not the book I wanted to write.
Wow.
This was not the book I would have written. This is not the book I chose to write. I would say that I tried to not write this book. Let's put it that way.
I love that.
I resisted. The honest truth and confession is I resisted writing this book. And left to my own devices, there would be no magic of surrender. I sat down after my first book, You Are the One, was a bestseller. I sat down and I scripted on a whiteboard 50 to 75 different ideas of books I thought would be a bestseller, books I thought publishers would want, books I thought would get me a publishing deal, books I thought, my audience would want, books I mean, the list went on. And I came up with some really great ideas. But the truth was, none of these ideas felt aligned. none of these ideas felt alive as a living truth reality in my soul. They just felt like ideas that I was coming up with to come up with ideas, And so the only word that I wrote on this whiteboard that resonated with a vibratory frequency and energy was the word surrender. I thought to myself, oh shit, that's the book. Oh shit, I don't want to write about that because there's so many misconceptions that we have as human beings about surrender. It's kind of like we know we should surrender, but there's a but, which we can get into what that resistance is. And so I had to surrender to the book about surrender, and I had to surrender to the book that was seeking to be written. And when I threw my arms up and said, okay, this is the book, everything about myself, my life, my childhood, everything I went through, how my parents came together, all of this stuff just made sense. And the book kind of came through and downloaded itself. And so I would say that I didn't really write the book. I was just a vessel for the book to come through. But I would say that the seeds for the book were planted a few years before in ways that I was not paying attention to and didn't know, because probably had God said, you're going to write this book, I would definitely have said no. But the seeds were planted and now they were just sprouting within me, right? And so in 2016, my mother, who we could say is the person I love the most, my mother was diagnosed with stomach cancer. And it was incredibly difficult. It was incredibly challenging. It was heartbreaking and heart-wrenching to lose the person I love the most. I mean, she was incredible as a mother. She for me is the reason I know love and I know how to love. It's because of her. I can say, and I'm aware that not everyone can say this in this human experience, but I'm blessed to be able to say, I know what real love is because of this woman. And so her and I were very close. So when I got the news that she was stage 4 stomach cancer, my heart just shattered, And so I live in Los Angeles. I was living in LA. She lives in London. I began to fly back and forth from LA to London, LA to London, LA to London every month for a week. So 3 weeks in LA and traveling, 1 week in London, being with her, taking care of her chemo sessions, taking care of her, taking her on walk, trying to get her well. After a few months, I realized I don't think she's going to make it. And it became kind of apparent to me as I saw the demise of her physical body. And that was a process of surrender. And so about 7 months into the process, after spending daily time in chemo sessions with my mother and taking walks with my mother, all the things that I was too busy to do, it was like the only regret I had in my life was, why the hell didn't I spend more time with my mom? What, like, here I am running around saving the world, but why did I not spend more time with my mom? All the dreams and the things I wanted to do with my mom, I'm not going to get to do with my mom. And it was heartbreaking. And the doctors finally said, there's nothing else that we can do for you. You're going to die. So get your affairs in order, because we don't know how long you have. Could be days, could be weeks, could be months. And so I looked my mother, this is at the hospital, I looked my mother in the eyes in the parking lot. And I said to her 2 questions. Number 1, are you afraid? My mother looked at me, this little Japanese woman, and she said, no, I'm not afraid, because I know I'm not this body. This body is just a temporary vehicle for my soul. And even though this body dies, what I truly am, my spirit, is beyond birth and beyond death. I will die. But she said to me, I will be guiding you from the other side. And in a profound way, I have seen the spirit of my mother guiding me in such profound ways since her death. And in a strange way, I felt closer to my mother when she died, because my connection with her was no longer limited to the physical human form anymore. It was infinite, she was everywhere for me. And so that was profound. But the real seed, I think, for surrender was planted in watching her this whole year. And I asked my mother, I wanted to be a good son, right? Because I thought, I wasted so much time. I wish I was there more for her. So now I want to be a really good son. And I asked my mom, what can I do for you? What can I do for you in your final days? Where do you want to go? What can I buy? What can I get you? Where can I take you? What, you just name it. Let's do it. And she looked at me and she said, there's nothing I want and there's nothing I need. The only thing I want is what God wants for my life. In that simple statement, told me everything. I understood in the moment that my mother was at peace. She was free. She was free. She wasn't attached to living. She wasn't attached to dying. She was at peace. And that was her freedom. She was living surrender. And so when I was thinking about the book, flashed on that moment, everything made sense. I realized I'd been prepared to write this book throughout my whole life. And I started to think about all of the people that really inspired me: Jesus, Buddha, Gandhi, Mandela, Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, Bruce Lee, Muhammad Ali, none of which were weak people, by the way, right? They were not wimps and pushovers. They were visionaries, revolutionaries. And when I started looking at these people, I saw that all of them had one thing in common. All of them, at some point in their lives, they chose to surrender themselves to their deeper purpose. They chose to surrender themselves to God, to the divine, to the universe, to this infinite intelligence that is life itself, to their soul calling. They chose to surrender themselves to be used by life. And in that surrender, they transcended their human limitations. You know, we're all limited as humans. None of us are perfect. They transcended their human limitations. They tapped into another dimension of life, grace, infinite possibilities and potential. And that's when, in that surrender, I believe that's when life began to express through them. That's when life began to speak through them and use them and perform miracles through them in ways that they could not have even imagined with the limitation of their conscious mind and awareness. And so that's when I knew, and that's when I felt that surrender is the most powerful thing that you can do. That surrender is the most powerful thing that we can do as human beings in this life experience. That surrender is the real secret to manifestation, unlimited manifestation. Surrender is the real key or the password to freedom. And I think if we want to experience more of the magic, right, in our life, magic, not that which is like hocus pocus, but magic which is abundance and joy and that which is beyond our current ego's capacity to imagine what's possible. If we want more magic in our lives, we have to surrender. There's no other way. The challenge is in our culture, we have this misconception that surrender is weak, that surrender is passive, that if you surrender, you're going to be left behind. You're going to be a doormat. You won't manifest your goals, dreams, and desires. You're going to get less in life. And I'm actually saying, no, like, what if you really understood the essence of surrender, what it really meant to let go? And what if you didn't get less, but you got more than you could have planned, more than you could have expected, more than you could have visualized, more than you could have intended with the limitation of your mind, because the mind, our personas are so limited, it's not able to see the whole picture. And often life, God is seeking to bless us with a buffet, but we're holding so tightly onto the peanuts that we're not able to see the infinite buffet and possibilities that life is seeking to bless us with. And so in many ways, we don't realize that we are limiting life. We're limiting God. We're limiting the universe. We're limiting the infinite intelligence. We're putting limitations on life. So surrender is to take the limitations off of life. Surrender is to let go of control, or I should say the illusion of control. Surrender, which is rooted in fear, and control is the master addiction, really. Surrender is to let go of who we think we should be, how we think life should be, so that we can truly become open and available to what life is seeking to unfold and express through us. And that's when the magic happens.
It opens us to this receptive to receive, right? To receive more, just like you're talking about. And especially that's true for everybody, but especially for women. I mean, that's how we have more, do more, get more, all of the things, because we're so much of it's all in our receptivity, right? And
Yes, yes.
our resonance. Yes. Beautiful. So, how, for the listeners, how do you begin to surrender? How does that go?
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a multi-layered layers to that question. But one thing I would say is I think it's helpful that we first just shift the paradigm, the concept about surrender being hard. Because the more we believe it's so hard, the harder it is. And that
It's
belief
harder to
becomes
try to control everything, right?
yes, it's actually harder to look. If you look at it this way, surrender is your natural state. Surrender is natural. Surrender is actually easier. We've just been conditioned to control and hold on for reasons which I'll explain. But I'm holding it for those listening on audio. I'm holding a pen right now. I'm making a fist, holding the pen so tightly. We've been conditioned to hold this pen so tightly that eventually it starts feeling normal. Holding tightly starts feeling the norm. But the truth is, we've been conditioned to hold on. We've been conditioned to resist. We've been conditioned to protect ourselves. We've been conditioned to close our hearts. We've been conditioned to hide. And so the more we hold on to this pen and I make this fist, eventually it starts feeling normal. But the truth is, when I say surrender and let go, dropping the pen, look how natural that it's actually easier to surrender and live in that flow than hold on. It's just we've been conditioned. We've been conditioned. And so a couple of things. I would say that one place people can start the practice and process of surrender, or one thing that stops our ability to surrender and break through to that next level and let go, are all the ways that we lie to ourselves.
Yeah.
As human beings, for ways which I'll explain, we are constantly lying to ourselves. We've been conditioned to lie to ourselves, not because we're bad, it's just survival. We stay in relationships that we know are not aligned. We work jobs that we hate. We say yes when we mean no. We betray ourselves and wonder why we feel terrible, right? And so I think there is no transformation without truth. There is no next level without truth. There is no healing, breakthrough, peace without truth. To me, truth is real yoga. Truth is real spiritual practice. And so we have to be willing to start with the truth. It's the truth that would set you free. And the truth is part of when we are courageous enough to question ourselves,
Right.
to question what we believe, to question who we think we are. And so if we could start with, what lies am I telling myself?
Right.
Just to sit with what lies am I telling myself? What am I pretending to not know? Because in so many ways, the ego has a sneaky strategy to play this game of confusion. Like, I'm confused. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't really know. I don't really know. When deep down we know. But if we remain in a smokescreen of confusion, I don't know if this relationship is right for me. I don't really know what my purpose is. Then we don't have to actually own it, take responsibility, and do something about it, and take an action, or let go, or make a decision. And so I think we have to start with, okay, what lies am I telling myself? And we have to want to be free more than we want what we want. We have to want to be free more than we want what we have. What lies am I telling myself? What am I pretending to not know? What is it costing me? When we lie to ourselves, it is painful. When we lie to ourselves, it doesn't feel good. When we lie to ourselves, it's meant to hurt. When we lie to ourselves, it's not meant to feel good. And so the pain that we feel that comes from lying to ourselves is actually a gift. It's a messenger. It's a part of us that is receiving a message. The pain is a messenger trying to get our attention, showing us where we are not in alignment. And so if we're willing to listen to the message of the pain, use this message of the pain so that we can course correct ourselves, then we can move into another level of truth, another level of freedom, another level of peace. And that is, you could say, the beginning of surrender. And so it might look like just the willingness to say, I hate my job, rather than pretending I hate my job. Now, I tell people, take the pressure off of yourself from having to take any action, because sometimes the fear of taking action is what triggers the ego's resistance. because we're afraid of the consequence. So if we're willing to just say, I hate my job, I'm not willing to leave, but I hate my job. Feel that.
Yeah.
It might be a bit scary, but acknowledge the truth. I'm not in love with my wife anymore. For the last 10 years, I'm not in love with her. That starts a process inside. We don't know where it's going to go, but it begins a process. It might sound like the courage to say, okay, I have an alcohol problem. I have an addiction to alcohol. This is an issue. I'm not going to live in denial anymore. I have a problem with XYZ. Yep. That's the beginning of surrender. That's the beginning of a breakthrough. That's the beginning of a shift. So if we have the courage to start there, that creates an opening. And so, does that make sense?
Absolutely. That I'm not stuck even. Like, I'm not stuck. I have choices.
Yeah. Yes. Sometimes we convince ourselves that we're stuck as a sort of ego sneaky strategy, because if I've convinced myself I'm stuck, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to actually make a change because I'm stuck. When the truth is, we're not. We all have choices.
We all do.
Some people say, well, I don't have a choice. I have to. You don't have to.
No.
There are consequences to not or doing, but we all have a choice. And the moment we give away, abdicate that choice, we disempower ourselves and move into a victim position.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I can totally resonate with that. I mean, I lived that way for much of my life. I felt like I was stuck in my corporate job because I was the breadwinner and so on. So like, I get it for the listeners out there who are, you know, maybe thinking about those things or whatever. Like, I lived that way for 26 years, you know, or more, feeling like I was stuck in certain things. But yeah, we have choices. And like you said, there might be consequences. You know, is everybody going to be happy if we change? Are all the people around us going to like everything that we decide to change? No, it's going to take our loved ones, our family members, our friends, time to get used to the new us. And if they don't and they can't, then there's decisions that need to be made about who should really be in your life. But I love that, you know, your message is to just start with the truth, because and to take the pressure off of taking action at first, because just sitting with the truth will what's the word I'm looking for? It will
marinate. It will marinate you. It starts an internal bubbling and process inside of you of feeling and feeling and feeling and feeling the fear. And acknowledging the fear. Because when we suppress the fear, we stay stuck. But all feelings remain present until we feel them fully. So we don't realize that if I suppress the fear is there deep down inside of us. And as a result of that fear being there, we don't have the chance to sort of process through it and move through it. We're stuck in that fear.
Yeah. I've been doing a lot of dancing with my fear lately. And, you know, it's so empowering, you know, just taking that little step and just saying, okay, I'm fucking doing this. You know, I'm scared, but I'm doing it. And then it's like, oh, it's like so empowering and like so just transformational, little steps even. So I like to talk to people about dancing with those fears. And another thing that I just want to like reiterate or emphasize for people is it's not necessarily what's going on up in your head. It's got to be what you're feeling in your body, because your body gives you messages. Your intuition gives you messages. And you just need to get in tune with that, because everybody has their truth and you can feel it if you're looking for it, if you're seeking it, I guess. And I assume, Kute, you've found that in your journey as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then, so starting with the truth and then listening to the messages you get, right? Following the breadcrumbs that the universe puts in front of you, like we were talking about earlier. So,
you know, and we have to be willing to question ourselves. We have to be willing to question ourselves. You know, as I said, surrender is your natural state.
Yeah.
If you look at children.
Oh, right. We can learn so much.
You had 2 kids, right? they were free when they were born. They were just free beings. They weren't like, oh, I'm afraid of you. They would just cry. They cry when they feel like crying. They poop when they feel like pooping. They roll when they feel like rolling. Until obviously we start training them and teaching them, don't do that, do this, but they're just surrendered to whatever until we start conditioning them. They're born free. They stand on the table, they dance, they're not afraid, they'll run naked. They're not afraid of what you think, or, oh, I got a little chubby belly. They're just being whatever they're being, free beings, fully alive, fully self-expressed, connected to the divine. So what the hell happened to us, right? So what happens is with these free beings, we fully surrendered, we incarnate into this human experience.
Yep.
Meet our parents. God bless all parents. I'm a parent. We're just doing the best that we can do based on our childhood and our parents and our upbringing, our conditioning, our level of consciousness, our generational patterns that have been passed down. And so as children, we're born into a sort of momentum of karma and generational patterns. And so that's when the conditioning process begins. Maybe dad is crazy. Maybe mom's an alcoholic. Maybe they're fighting all the time. Maybe dad leaves. Maybe they both leave. Maybe we're abused. Maybe there's fighting. Maybe there's divorce. And so maybe our parents were great people, but they just didn't have the emotional intelligence to know how to meet our emotional needs. And that was painful. And so two things happened. Number one, we learned as children from a very young age all sorts of strategies to shut down, disconnect, and not feel. Shut down, disconnect, suppress, 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 and layers 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 of suppressed emotion, feeling, pain, hurt, guilt, anger, sadness. Pain was sort of pressed down and began to cover up that natural expression, that natural light, that authentic nature, that surrendered beingness. And we maybe closed our heart and erected walls around our heart in order to not feel the pain of dad being gone, not feel the pain of mom and dad are fighting, not feel the pain of having those emotional needs met. And so we learn to control our feelings and suppress them and shut them down and manage those feelings as a way of functioning and surviving. And then we also learned a way of being to go into the world. Like, who do I need to be in order for mom and dad to love me? Oh, I'll be nice. I'll be kind. I'll be funny. I'll be happy. I'll be sweet. I'll be the yes person. So we developed a role and a mask and a persona, right? In order to get love, validation, approval. And so avoiding pain, love, validation, and approval, we learn to contort ourselves into a certain shape of a person that got reinforced by life and society and religion and parents and school and teachers and, you know, everyone around us, that this version of ourselves that we got contorted and conditioned to be, that we learned to hold tightly onto, became who we thought and believed ourselves to be. That is ego. That holding on identification is what ego is. And so the degree to which we're conditioned is the degree to which we're not free, but the degree to which we're not free is the degree to which we live in fear and we're limited. So when you and I, when we say the word surrender for the ego, that which we mistakenly believe ourselves to be, surrender is some terrifying words. Surrender feels like death to the ego because it requires letting go of the version of ourselves that we believe ourselves to be. It's not what we truly are. It's just what we've been conditioned to be, and we believe ourselves to be that. And the degree to which we believe ourselves to be that is the degree to which we're often afraid of surrendering, because it requires letting go of certain beliefs and ideas and identities and ways that we've learned to perceive ourselves. And so we have to acknowledge, we have to first become aware of our conditioning and our roles and our personas and our sense of identification, and realize that ego is not a thing. Ego is a process of identification. And those stories and personas that we've developed is not who we really are. It's just identities that we've and labels that we've held on to that we believe ourselves to be. It's not what we really are. So when we realize that what we are letting go of is not the truth about us, what we're letting go of and surrendering is not the real you. What we're letting go of and surrendering is the false version, is the mask, is the role, is not the true essence of what you are. It starts to change your relationship to surrender, because now you realize you are not going to die. What's going to die is the illusory version of yourself. And that kind of shifts. As you shift your perception, that can also shift your relationship with surrender.
Yeah, beautiful. And so then it's examining those old stories, right? That we continue
Yes.
to tell ourselves that
Questioning
we're
yourself.
believing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then writing new ones, right? And so
Yeah.
how do people do that?
I think you have to question yourself. I wouldn't even say write new ones, because many times if you just try to write a new one, sometimes you'll write a new one based on an old version of yourself that you're kind of making up with your mind. I actually tell people, be willing to not know who, question yourself. See, the ego doesn't want to change.
Right.
Ego doesn't want to change. The ego's job is to reinforce your existence. And the ego's job is to protect you from getting hurt. So it holds on. The ego wants everyone else wants the president to change, wants your kids to change, want your husband to change, want your wife to change. But the ego itself doesn't want to change, because that's how it keeps itself safe.
Yeah.
In fear. And so I tell people, be willing to actually not know who you are for a moment. And I think it's important that we question ourselves. Who am I? Oh, I'm this kind of person. How do I know that? Can I be sure? What if it wasn't true? Because often, many of the things that we believe about ourselves and hold very tightly onto, that end up limiting us. I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not this, I'm that, I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable, are just stories that we made up that we believe. So as an example, this idea, let's take something specific, this idea that I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable, which can be a big one. When you believe you're unlovable, you'll tend to not attract healthy relationships. You'll tend to attract people that don't love you, to reinforce that belief that you're not lovable. See, I'm not lovable because this and this and this. You'll tend to push love away because you don't believe somebody can truly love you. You'll tend to not be able to receive money and abundance in your life because you don't believe you're worth it and lovable. And so the core belief can affect many things. Yet you can just tell yourself, do a mantra, an affirmation, pump yourself up. I'm lovable, I'm lovable, I'm lovable. But deep down, you may not believe it, right? And so I think people often ask me, why is it so hard sometimes to let go of a belief such as I'm not lovable? It's also rooted in control. If you can understand this, what might be underlying the mechanism, especially if you have this belief, folks, as you're listening, it can shift things for you. You see, when something happened as a young child, dad wasn't around, mom left, something happened, you made up a story. Oh, this means I'm not lovable. You made that mean you're not lovable. So first you have to realize that was just a story. That was just an interpretation of reality. It wasn't the reality. So one thing is to question, is this fact or fiction? Is this true or is this real? Because many times we're believing fiction to be fact, but it's not necessarily fact. So I often ask people, okay, this idea and story that you made up, I'm unlovable. Is it fact or fiction? Is it real? Can you? No, it's real. Well, why? Because my mom left, and if I was lovable, she would not have left. So I ask people to just ask themselves, could mom leaving, and folks, you can fill in the blank, could mom leaving have meant something else?
It's possible.
It's possible. And that beginning of questioning, wait a second, I held on to the idea that I'm unlovable because mom left, but could it have meant anything else? It is possible. That can start loosening one's grip on the story. It could have meant mom was crazy. It could have meant mom loved you so much that she felt you would have been better off her not being in your life. You would have been better off with your dad. It could have meant so many things, but we just hold on to make it mean I'm not lovable. So we have to start softening and massaging and questioning ourselves. Could it have meant it? Could it? No, could it? Well, everything is possible. So, okay, that possibility is an opening of letting go of the vice grip of one's story and belief system. Okay, could have meant anything. Yeah, well, what else could it have meant? And then we can start questioning the different possible interpretations of reality that could have meant. And so that starts the sort of loosening. The other thing is, I often ask people who say, no, it's fact that I'm unlovable. How is it fact? No, it's fact. The fact is, can you show me unlovable? People go, what do you mean? Well, fact
Yeah.
is, this is a phone. I'm holding up a phone, folks. Fact is, this is a phone. Fact is, I'm holding up a pen. This is a pen. Show me unlovable. And
Yeah.
nobody is able to show me unlovable. So it's not really a fact. It's kind of a amorphous interpretation, but it's not a fact. And
Right.
so we often hold our stories and beliefs like these solidified things that are real, but they're not really real. We hold them like they're reality. So we have to have the courage to question. That's, I think, another step in the process. We have to have the courage to really question ourselves.
Right. And it can be so
And
hard to let go of some of those things
you know
because
why?
practiced it too for a really long time. Yeah.
Yes. Here's why. One point I wanted to make was it's often rooted in control,
Yeah.
which is why it's often hard to let go. And what I mean by that is mom left, something happened, I'm unlovable. Creates a deep sense of shame. And the reason we so tightly hold on to I'm unlovable, even though we know we need to let it go, is if I'm unlovable, and folks, see if you can relate to this. If I am unlovable, then in a strange way, I still have some kind of control.
Yeah.
Because if it's me that's unlovable, maybe I can do something to get my mom's love. Maybe I can do something. Maybe I'll dye my hair. Will he love me? Maybe I'll lose weight. Will he love me? Maybe I'll do Botox. Will he love me? Maybe I'll get a Lamborghini. Will he love me? Maybe I'll become a billionaire. Maybe I'll, save the world. Maybe I'll feed the children. Maybe I can do something. And so then our life, unconsciously, in a strange way, becomes a never-ending chase to try through different means to get love from the world and those around us. And it becomes exhausting. And so part of why it can be difficult and scary to surrender the belief of I'm unlovable is because if I let that go, I'm going to have to let go of a false sense of control. And then how the hell am I going to get love? If the way I've learned to get love is to try to prove my lovability by achieving things and doing things, and now I let that go, then what? Then we have to truly actually come to the point of acknowledging it's not that I'm not lovable, it's that my dad was not capable. And that acknowledgement is a reality check that for that scared part of us, for that young part of us, can be terrifying to acknowledge because it moves us into a state of surrender and can move us for a moment into feeling a bit, if it was my dad that was not capable, that means it's not in my control. And if it's not in my control, then what?
Yeah.
But that is the portal that we must go through in order to let go. And it's a portal of death. A part of you has to die in order to acknowledge my dad was not capable, and there's nothing I can do about it. And when you really let that go, it frees you, but it requires that you go through a process of grieving. When you so I could say there is no true authentic surrender without grieving. And often, because surrender is a death of an identity, it's a death of a phase of one's life, it's a death of a story, it's a death of an idea, it's a death of a version of yourself, it's a death of letting go of the fact that you weren't lovable and having to realize that it was not you, and there's nothing you can do about that, and let that die. And so grieving is the portal to true surrender.
And grieving
And
is hard, and
grieving can
it's
be difficult, yes, but
and
holding on is difficult.
yes, but that in itself can be scary for people, right? Because that means that they have to feel those feelings and go through that
Yes.
loss, and
Yes.
that can seem harder than just holding on to these false beliefs that you have, right?
Yes.
But
But we have it's because we've been conditioned as a culture to suppress our feelings.
Right.
We have this idea that grieving is hard. We have this idea that if I grieve, it will last forever. We have this idea that if I grieve, it will be overwhelming and overtake me. We sometimes have this false spiritual idea of like, oh, I want to stay in a high vibration, and grief is a low vibration. So we want to practice the law of attraction, but we have this misconception that if I grieve, then I'm going to be in a low vibration. I'm going to attract more things to grieve about, not realizing that when we don't grieve, you suppress the grief, that vibration stays in you, then you will really attract based on the unresolved energetic that you haven't allowed yourself to process. And so really the quickest way through the grief is to feel the grief, because all feelings that are fully felt will dissolve. But sometimes grief doesn't dissolve at one time. It's layers, and it's layers, and it's layers, and it's layers, and it's layers,
the work.
and it's layers, and that that is the work. And so I think I would ask everyone to sit with, what have you not allowed yourself to grieve?
Right.
And someone might say, but I feel fine. I'm not sad. But in so many ways, we are carrying big or even small or subtle layers of grief in our heart that we're holding on to, that is blocking us from truly opening and surrendering. That relationship that you haven't fully let go of yet, and now a part of your heart isn't fully open and available. So now you enter into a new relationship. Let's say you manifest a new relationship, but now a part of your heart is still closed. And because the part of your heart is closed, the new relationship pushes against that part of your heart, and maybe you're afraid of letting that into that part of you. You push the relationship away, you break up, and now you're even more closed. And often when we don't allow ourselves to just grieve fully, we carry old residue and old energy and old relationships with us into the next experience, into the next relationship, into the next job, into the next whatever. And so I think to truly surrender and let go requires that you grieve, because the next level of your life requires the next level of you.
Right.
And the next level of you requires that you let go of everyone and everything that is no longer a vibrational match. Let me repeat, requires that you let go of everyone and everything that is no longer a vibrational match. The challenge is, many times out of fear and being scared, we hold on to the people and the situations and the things that are no longer a vibrational match. And we hold on to those, not realizing that holding on is the very thing that is blocking your blessing, blocking your abundance, blocking the next level of your manifestation. You can't manifest the new being the old. You can't manifest what's next being what was. And so when you let go, and when you surrender, and when you release, that's when you make space in your life for new energy and new possibilities to enter and emerge.
Absolutely. Yes. And I would love if we had time for one more question, but I'm looking at the time and I don't know. I got to check in with you to see if that would be all right.
Let's go for it.
Okay. Well, I wanted to kind of bring us back just for a moment to something you said a couple of minutes ago, that you have to be willing to not know who you are for a moment in this whole process, right? And that can be in this whole like ego, death of the ego and of your old self and all the stories. And that can be really scary to people. So what would you say to people who are like, again, I don't know who I am.
Congratulations.
If I
Great. Who
don't
am
have
I?
all these stories.
Just keep up. That's great. Who am I if I don't have these stories? Just keep asking. But rather than saying, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that, and just sort of manufacturing things out of fear, be willing to just sit in the unknown for a moment, because if you do, who you are will emerge. The truth of who you are will emerge authentically from your being, authentically from within. And I say you will find out who you are truly from a deeper place, from a deeper space. And I think that's the true freedom, when you're willing to not know. The truth of what you are will emerge.
I just got goosebumps all over. My whole body's lit up from that because that's so true. Like that's exactly what I experienced too. And like we're there. We are like the space between all of these stories and thoughts and false beliefs. Yeah, we're in there.
Yes.
So
Yes.
beautiful. This has been just amazing. Thank you so very much for being here with us today. So many gems and so much wisdom. And I would love to be a speaker like you someday. Where can people find you? Where should people go to?
Sure. Couple of things. As we enter into the new year, I would say definitely check out the book, The Magic of Surrender.
Yeah.
Buy it for your friends. It's available on Amazon on the paperback version. Check it out. Number two, twice a year I do a very special event in Bali. This is probably the final year that I'm doing this event. Last year was supposed to be the final year, but so many people have asked me to do one or two more of these events. I've done 22 of them. So I'm deciding to do a final year of perhaps my deepest work. And so if you're listening and you're someone who you feel a calling to serve humanity, you feel that you've been put on the planet for a purpose bigger than yourself, you feel a sense of destiny to impact people, you feel ready to let go of your stories and heal and transform generational patterns, you feel ready to connect with your truth, your authentic nature and your voice and your power, and to share your gifts with the world, I want to invite you on a life-changing journey. For the last 13 years now, I've done an event in Bali. It's 12 days. It's a 12-day experiential seminar training without walls that will transform your life on every level. It's probably one of the most powerful events on the planet. And that's not me saying it. It's my clients saying it. Mm-hmm. It's unlike anything on the planet, I would say. 12 days immersion with me. You can find out more, www.boundlessblissbali.com. That's boundlessblissbali.com. Go to the website, watch the video, apply. We only take 18 people at one time. So the next one is July the 20th through July the 31st, July the 20th through July the 31st. Would love it if you checked it out, share it with your friends. Look forward to seeing you there. If you feel called, there is an interview process for that. But if you feel it, I promise you miracles. Instagram, you can find me on Instagram, Kute Blackson. Facebook, Kute Love Now. My podcast, Soul Talk. My main website is also Kute, K-U-T-E, KuteBlackson.com. You can find out about many of the new upcoming events I have coming up in 2024. Find out more on my website there, and you can find out about sometimes over the last 20 years, I've coached and guided many leaders and visionaries, and so I have a mentorship program specifically for leaders and visionaries. You can find out more on my website, KuteBlackson.com.
Amazing. And we'll have all that information for everybody in the show notes and the links and everything. So no worries about that. You can find them there. Again, it's been such a magical conversation, and I've just enjoyed it so much. And thank you again for being here with us.
Thank you.
OMG. I am just lit up from that conversation. He is just extraordinary. And it's mind-blowing to me how he can just talk like that so effortlessly. I just loved it all. And I don't know about you, but I resonated with everything that he said, and everything coming out of his mouth was like a hell yes for me. There are so many takeaways. I narrowed it down to 13, and that was really hard because there were just so many treasures in this conversation. I just loved it. And I was just so honored to have Kute on the podcast, especially because I'm just starting out, and that didn't matter to him at all. So I also really love that about him. And I hope you loved him too. So here we go. Here are the takeaways. 1, sometimes what our souls guide us to do is not comfortable or convenient and is scary as fuck. This doesn't mean that you're on the wrong track. It means that the old you is falling apart in a way to make room for the new version of you. If we allow fear to hijack our full expression, we live inside a very limited prison. 2, your soul has an intelligence of its own. When you follow your soul's true guidance, you will always end up in the right place at the right time, doing the right things with the right people. 3, follow the nudges, guidance, and intuitive hits, even when it doesn't make logical sense. Don't resist them and start with taking just a small step. 4, you don't have to know where you're going to get exactly where you need to be. Life reveals itself in the process of living it. Ooh, I love that one. 5, do what feels most aligned with you, period. 6, fully surrendering is real freedom. It's childlike and it's where our true authenticity is. It's the most powerful thing we can do as humans. 7, let go of the illusion of control. Let go of who you think you should be and how you think life should be so you can truly become open and available to what life is seeking to unfold and express through you. And that's where the magic happens. 8, be willing to not know who you are for a moment. Question yourself, look at the facts, and be willing to let go of the old stories that are really just possible interpretations of situations. We just hold on to them as realities, and this is rooted in control, which is why it's so hard to let go. 9, shift the paradigm about surrender being hard. The more we believe it's so hard, the harder it is. Surrender is our natural state. We've just been conditioned otherwise. The degree to which we're conditioned is the degree to which we're not free. It's actually harder to hold on and try to control everything than to just surrender. 10, how do you begin to surrender? Start by stopping the lies you tell yourself. Start by being completely honest and truthful with yourself. The truth will set you free. We've all heard that before, haven't we? We have to want to be free more than what we think we want and more than what we have, and be willing to question yourself. 11, to truly surrender and let go requires that you grieve, because the next level of your life requires the next level of you, which requires you to let go of everyone and everything that is no longer a vibrational match. I love that one too, because I'm all about energy. 12, letting go and surrendering makes space for new energy and new possibilities to enter and emerge. And 13, sit with the unknown for a moment, because the truth of who you are will emerge authentically from within. You will find out who you are from a deeper place. And that one I love too, because I experienced that myself. It was scary as fuck when I was, sitting there going, who am I really? Like when I left my corporate job and was asking, who am I without this? And who am I without all the things that I've held on to for so long, including the hateful things that I, say to myself and the patterns, negative patterns that I have. Who am I and what do I really want? And what do I really like? And how do I feel about life and everything in it instead of what I was always told? And the truth of who I was emerged when I allowed it. Okay, so I highly recommend Kute's book, The Magic of Surrender. Check him out on all the things, follow him on Instagram. And if you really want a huge transformation in your life, check out his life-changing experiential event in Bali. He said it was going to be the last time he's doing it. And thank you so much for spending your time here with me. I hope that this podcast resonates with you, sparks inspiration. I hope it fills you up, and I hope it gives you hope that you have choices and can change. I also want to invite you to check out my coaching services. I absolutely love supporting others in their journeys to what they are seeking. It's really the most fulfilling role I've ever had. If you're feeling like you need help or support, whether that's with cultivating more self-love, finding your purpose, being more authentic, or just following what's really in your heart, I'm here for you. And remember, you have all the answers within you. I just help you recognize them and bring them forward. You can find more information about my one-on-one guidance sessions at reikiflowmn.com. All right. There are so many more incredible episodes coming up soon. So please follow along on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And please download, follow, or subscribe. That way you'll be notified when new episodes are available. I'm posting every week for sure on Thursdays and more in between if I'm compelled to share something extra. And I know a couple of you have reached out asking me to do episodes on specific things, and I'm working on those. So stay tuned. And if you're liking the podcast and benefiting from it, please leave me a review. Like I always say, reviews are like gifts to me and they help me be able to keep going. If you know of anyone who would benefit from this particular episode or other episodes, please send them a link, text them, or post about the podcast on your socials. And if you have any questions you want answered on the podcast or things you want to hear about or have help with or guests that you would love to hear from, let me know. Reach out to me. You can DM me on social. You can comment on my posts, or you can email me at paula@reikiflowmn.com. Thank you again. I love you so much.